mean, we're one of the few that stood up during COVID, and we didn't close our doors, and we wrote probably about 40,000 vaccination letters, exemption letters. We even put it in our statement of faith because Canadian government was saying, "Hey, you know what? It's not a valid." They changed the Human Rights Code, and they said, "Well, if it's not a part of the church's actually constitution and statement of faith, then it's not a real mandatory thing for the church." Okay, so we made it. We put it so that hey, and we're not saying that you can't go to the hospital, you can't go to that. That's not what we ever said. But we are saying that there are some things that people are forcing on people and putting in people's bodies that is just not right. And you should have that freedom to choose. You should have the right to choose what you put in your body. And as a church, we shouldn't be intentionally trying to kill ourselves. Amen. I mean, we have to think, okay, this is the temple of the living God, and there's just some things out there that the world doesn't care about. So we took that stance, and we saved a lot of people's jobs around the world because we took that stance, and many people got saved during COVID. We were baptizing. I think we baptized in one day about 120 people in New York, in LA. All around the world, people were getting inspired, and so many people got saved in those times, and people remember that. So we are one of those radical churches that we stand. And when I say radical, honestly, I got to stop saying that, because the Church of Jesus Christ in the Bible is just the Church of Jesus Christ, and technically it would look like radical because we have compromised, watered down churches today. So we almost think the watered down churches are normal, and the ones that follow the Bible, they're radicals, right? It's actually the opposite way around. The churches that follow the Bible, that's normal Christianity, and the churches that are compromised, that's not even Christianity at all. So very briefly, I just quickly spoke with this lady, and my mind was just going. I was like, this is weird. Like, what's wrong? Like, we trust in the pharmacy so much when there's a lot of natural medicines and herbs that even a dandelion in her backyard, we're throwing it away. Did you know the dandelion has so much medicinal properties? Would you take a dandelion and make a tea? I mean, you could. I remember years ago. Sorry, I know I talk a little more. I'm gonna give her a chance to talk. Okay, but years ago, something just occurred to me. I was like, wait a second. Here I am buying all my cabbage and everything from the grocery store, and we're surrounded by a lot of green leaves. And I know that sounded, my friends started laughing. I'm like, yeah, but wait a second. Like, what's wrong with, I know you could probably think I'm crazy now, but what's wrong with having a maple leaf for dinner? I heard someone laugh. And I was like, there's a lot of leaves on the trees and the bushes right in front of us. Like, if tough times came, like, would we know how to make a salad without going to the grocery store? So you know what I did? I decided to take a bunch of leaves, and I made myself a salad. I washed it first. But you know what? Even if I didn't wash it, it was probably more clean than the things that in the grocery store with all the pesticides and stuff, right? So I brought a bunch of leaves together, and I washed it and put it together. And I put a little jerk sauce on it because if it ain't jerk, it don't work, right? And man, it tasted good. And I'm still alive. Had a different taste, maple leaf doesn't taste the same as cabbage. But who said we have to have, why is cabbage the staple of salads? I think we should make a movement, make maple leaf the staple of a salad. Amen. We're Canadian, right? So anyway, I started to realize that God makes things. There's a lot of natural medicines. There's a lot of things on the ground right in front of us, even in Toronto, that you can actually live off of and survive in the last days. And I think what we really need to do is have people like our guest come in, like people that know how to survive out in nature. I think we need to all go out in nature a little more and figure out, because that's how our ancestors survived. So I want to introduce this person. She has a website, and it's billyharrigan.com. Her journey began with birth of her first baby, and she had a medical mess there. Her baby, landing her baby in the NICU. I'm not sure what that is, with a prognosis of likely death and severe disability, and herself with some post-traumatic stress syndrome. And the baby survived and eventually thrived. And the obstetrician, I think the OB, I think that's what it means, said it was her faulty body as a woman that caused the dire outcome. So she kind of blamed the woman's body. And after some time investigating the situation, it became clear to her that this was an induction and the medicalization of a healthy pregnancy and birth that created the havoc. So, in other words, it wasn't her body that was the problem, it was the medical system that was the problem. And so she began, and she served families in Southern Ontario as a traditional birth companion, what Canadians used to be called the neighbor, when a baby was coming. And throughout her long career, she certified as a birth and postpartum doula, a childbirth educator, and a location counselor, and briefly tried to companion with families within the medicalized birth services industry, the hospital system, to a quick and disappointing end. Her years serving as a lay pastoral counselor laid the foundation for her work as a trauma informed specialist, knowing how easily our technocratic medicalized birth services industry wounds and cripples healthy families. She's the former director of education of childbirth International, where she supervised the education of over 7,000 students in over 130 countries, as well as training and mentoring their elite team of trainers. She's the author of the world's first and only comprehensive online course for becoming trained in the skills of trauma informed care specific to the perinatal client, and has authored and edited accredited ANCC continuing education for maternity service providers, nurses, midwives, physicians, doulas, location counselors, and more. She taught midwives in 125 countries in the skills of physiological birth and trauma informed care, and is well versed in the policy and the politics of midwifery around the world. Billy is a subject matter expert on obstetric violence, and birth related trauma, along with their courses, consequences, and solutions. So we have a big wig when it comes to the whole giving birth stuff. She has served on the PhD committee for a perinatal therapist and was a critical reviewer for Rachel Reed's extraordinary book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage. She's the founder and director of Birth Trauma Ontario, an agency that advocates for the restoration of common wisdom to common families so that more babies arrive safely and gently from healthy, empowered, and non traumatized mothers. It provides education in becoming trauma informed through an exceptionally comprehensive course for understanding the causes, the effects, and the solutions for birth related trauma. This course has been taken by students on 4 continents so far, to the universal praise. And she's the founder of the Hive Collective, a private member association that brings together women and men who are on a journey to reclaiming their sovereignty over their bodies, their births, babies, families, finances, and future. In this private association, members can conduct business with one another in the private realm while also learning from one another and building better health, wealth, families, and communities. So we're bringing her here as a mother, okay, a mother to help us and inform us as a congregation about childbirth. Okay, so it's not a sermon, it's informing us about childbirth like a mother would about childbirth to her daughter or to those who want to learn. And I want to learn. I'm going to be front row seat listening to all of this stuff about giving birth, and there will be a Q&A after. So please, let's give also a standing welcome to Billy Harrigan.
Oh, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure and delight to be with you all this morning. A special thank you to Carissa, who introduced me, and thank you to her baby for being so patient and allowing her to be here this morning, although I'm sure she would like her baby to get on with things. So, I am also an integrative health consultant, and I am very well known to the Technocratic Birth Services members, and they don't like me because I challenge everything they do. And I will say that I cannot take credit for about half of what is said about me. Because as it turns out, my backyard is not full of all the dead babies I've delivered. So, as it turns out, that wasn't true. We have to be very careful and very discerning about what we listen to and about what we take into our minds and our psyches. Who here has heard safe and effective? Was it true? Okay, how about this misinformation? This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. We heard that one. Was that true? No. Okay, well, how about you've heard, well, all that matters is a healthy baby. Is that true? There's something, if something is repeated enough times by enough people, the human brain tends to assume it's true, whether it is or not. So we've heard birth is extremely dangerous. Mothers used to die all the time. Well, thank goodness I was in a hospital because I would have died. Home birth is for families that don't actually care about their babies. We've all heard those, haven't we? Is it true? That's where we have to get very discerning. These are the stories that repetition that informs our psyche, and it has been repeated for so long by so many people in so many different modes of delivery, we actually believe it. If you think about any birth story in a television show or a movie, it's a catastrophe. She's screaming, they're rushing, something happens, and oh, thank goodness somebody saved her. Well, not so much when we get away from that stuff. I have here Stark's mother primary staff. And how they got that. When a woman died, the physician would do an autopsy on the corpse, just wipe the blood on their apron, go to the laboring woman, and put their filthy hands up her vagina. Why they felt they needed to put their hands into her intimate place is a total mystery to me. Why they still do it, I think, is an act of perversion. There's a baby coming out, you don't need fingers up there. So they introduced the staph infection to the women, and they died about a week, 10 days later, from something mysterious. They didn't know what it was. And it wasn't the physician, of course, because at the time, the belief was gentlemen, meaning of higher status, don't carry germs. It wasn't them. So it was perhaps bad humors, so they would open the windows to try and let the bad humors out. In about 1850, an obstetrician by the name of Ignaz Semmelweis thought of rinsing his hands before penetrating a woman. Why he didn't just decide to stop penetrating, it's still a mystery to me. But he rinsed his hands with a chloride solution, and the women stopped dying. So he introduced that to the medical industry. You know, if you rinse your hands, the women stop dying. Well, the maternity services industry does not change easily. It still doesn't. They've had about 350 years and women are still birthing on their backs. So they don't like to change. So they didn't accept that, and instead they accused Dr. Semmelweis of being an idiot and eventually got him committed into an insane asylum where he was beaten to death. And it took another generation for that generation of physicians to retire before the next one said, let's try washing our hands. Maternal mortality went down 90%. So here in Canada, prior to Confederation, the all-new, brand new, all-male Canadian Medical Association went to the brand new, all-male parliamentarians of Upper Canada, which later became Ontario, at the Boulevard Club in Toronto. And as they were smoking their cigars and swishing their brandy, the Medical Association asked the parliamentarians to make midwifery illegal because the midwives were the healers and the mothers at home knew what to do anyway, and they didn't need them. They weren't making any money. And they said, if you get rid of the midwives, well, then we'll go to the birth and then we'll have a customer for life. The parliamentarians thought that was a smashing good idea. Canada became the only country in our entire realm where midwifery was illegal. It was only decriminalized, first here in Ontario, in 1993. So while midwifery was illegal, I always get flack for this because they say, well, my great auntie on my father's side was a midwife. Yes. There have always been midwives, just like there's always been sex workers. It just doesn't mean the government approved of them. So yes, there have been. But here in Canada, with the midwives declared illegal, what did families do? They didn't call the doctor because he was expensive and he didn't know what to do anyway. So the history of Canada was they called the neighbor who had had 4 or 5 babies, and she had common birth knowledge, common birth wisdom, common birth skills that we all should have, and she would go to the birth. And in the Bible was where they recorded live births in the family Bible. They put the baby's name down, then they put the midwife down, who was the neighbor. And that's how we did it. And about early in the 1900s, heading up to World War II, and particularly afterwards, all developed nations really invested in infrastructure. So we got plumbing. You know, you don't use your kitchen for your bathroom. We got refrigeration, we had electricity, we had roads. In every country where infrastructure was improved, all mortality went down. People were living better, they were living longer, there was less illness. All of those diseases for which they developed vaccines had pretty much disappeared before they invented a vaccine for it. Well, there was only one population group where mortality went up: birthing women. Because at the same time, they were convinced to leave home and go into a hospital. At every point in human history, in every country, in every nation, when women as a population, I'm not talking about that one person who needed help, when across a population, women leave home and go into hospitals, their mortality goes up. In comparing the neighbor to hospital birth with a physician, Now, this was in a report in 1987 to the Canadian government. Birth with the midwife at the neighbor was, in terms of mortality, 4 times safer. If she went into the hospital, she was 4 times more likely to die. If she went into a hospital, she was 10 times more likely to be harmed. So these are the neighbors with common skills, and that's where the better outcomes were. But in the 1950s, public health, who would never betray us, went door to door in Toronto to convince women to leave home and go into a hospital, where she was 4 times more likely to die. And in fact, that's what happened to my grandmother. My grandmother had 9 or 10 children at home with a neighbor, including fraternal twins for her first. But then as she got older, she was convinced to go into a hospital, and she died from a hemorrhage. In the 1980s, up to the 1980s, the number one surgery performed in any OR in the developed world was a hysterectomy, the removal of her uterus. Today, from the 1980s onward, in any OR in Canada and pretty much any other developed nation, the primary surgery that's being done is cesarean surgery. Modern medicine has never been a friend to women. When midwifery was decriminalized in 1993, those of us who advocated for sensible and sane birth, and some of us used the word midwife and some of us didn't, and we just took care of women, and we thought, yes, now every family can have a holistic, crunchy woman who comes and makes food, and we have champagne after the baby's born, and we celebrate, and we bring our nursing babies, and we thought this was the future of midwifery. No, it was taken into the medical cartel, which is what I call it, adopted into the medical cartel. The midwives went to universities, and 4 years later we had many obstetricians that practiced medicine on low-risk women. Okay, let's talk about outcomes, because this is going to shock you, because we think the safest place to go to is a hospital. Well, let's talk about this. Why do women tell horror stories about their births? Because they were horrible. At a minimum, 1/3 of women will emerge from their birth experience with a scar on her uterus. And a minimum of 85% after that will never give birth normally, only surgically, and that's due to physician preference. I don't have current stats for Canada, so I'm going to be quoting some older stats. Healthcare is under the purview of all the provinces. Some of them report, some of them don't, and I'm not sure I would believe it today anyway. We know the industry lies. They don't really give good stats on maternal mortality or why women die, because apparently to some provinces it's just not interesting enough to gather information. We're just not that important. So in Canada, about a minimum of 1/3 will have a scar on her uterus. In Australia, 43% of first-time mothers will have a C-section. In the UK, up to 80% of first-time mothers are having a C-section. Around the world, surgical birth accounts for 25 to 90% of all births. In Canada, maternal mortality is rising. So the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada were asked the question, why are more mothers dying? Well, because without any information and without any data at all, and by the way, that society is just a lobbying industry. They think they're very important, but anybody can become a member in their lobbying industry. So without any data at all, they said, why are more mothers dying? They went, because the women are fatter and they're older and we've got refugees. That's not the reason. It's too much too soon, too much surgery. They're doing too much to the women. Prior to the COVID years, 1/3 of mothers spent their first years as a mother with depression and or anxiety. 1 in 10 spend the first year of their baby's life with thoughts of self-harm. Of those who have a C-section, 1 in 300 become addicted to opioids. About 45% of women in developed nations will describe their births as traumatic. Now that's just not, they didn't follow my birth plan. Traumatic is the features of fear for their life, either theirs or their babies, loss of control or autonomy, violation, violation of her sexuality, violation of her consent, violation of her personhood, and it's in the presence of helplessness. There wasn't a darn thing she could do to change them or to change what was happening to her. That's 45%. Prior to the COVIDious years, 1 in 8 women, after they gave birth, ended up with a traumatic brain injury. We call it PTSD. PTSD is a physical brain injury. The hippocampus is shrunk, the amygdala is inflamed, and that affects her cognition, her memory, her ability to perform various tasks. She has nightmares, flashbacks, and ongoing health problems. I want to ask, do you know of any industry who damages 1 in 8 of their customers' brains and gets away with it? And we still revere them and think they're saving us. When the outcomes are this bad, we have to ask, what is the spiritual root behind it? It's not a good one. In 1985, the World Health Organization wrote this. Now, that was prior to them becoming so profoundly compromised and corrupt, so it's actually worth it, from 1985. They wrote, by medicalizing birth, that is, separating a woman from her own environment and surrounding her with strange people, using strange machines to do strange things to her in an effort to assist her, the woman's state of mind and body is so altered that her way of carrying through this intimate act must also be altered, and the state of the baby born must equally be altered. The result is that it's no longer possible to know what births would have been like before these manipulations. Most healthcare providers no longer know what a non-medicalized birth is. The entire modern obstetrics and neonatological literature is essentially based on observations of medicalized birth. Well, I can tell you, I know what non-medicalized birth is, and I have seen hundreds and hundreds of them, and it is very different. We also have to address obstetric violence. Obstetric violence is a violation of the obstetric client. So it doesn't mean it's an obstetrician, it could be anybody, but it's the obstetric client who is violated. And it's anything that causes lasting physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual distress. And I'll tell you, obstetric violence is the true pandemic. When I wrote the course for becoming trauma-informed, I read thousands and thousands of documents, and I have spoken to hundreds and hundreds of women. It is utterly pervasive in every area of the world, and it certainly isn't immune here in Canada. It is just as bad. There was a study from Canada comparing home birth with a registered midwife integrated into the medical system and hospital birth with an obstetrician. The conclusion was, birth is as safe at home as in a hospital. And I think if that's your definition of safe, those outcomes are atrocious. Don't be ridiculous. Studies from everywhere in the world except pockets in the US, where the maternal mortality and infant mortality is the absolute worst in all developed nations. More mothers and babies die there than anywhere else in the developed nations. So other than that, if we look at anybody else, it says when it comes to the baby, they do fine no matter where they're born. God made us resilient, babies do fine. The mothers always do better away from there. And that includes women that the industry calls high risk. So they always do better. So, given that I think the spiritual roots of this industry are not holy based on outcomes, maybe we could look at something else. So I think, what is the alternative? Well, first let's talk about our programming. What were we programmed to believe? What do we see over and over and over? What do we hear over and over? What are we watching? What are we listening to? Is it true? If it's not true, then let's find some different voices to listen to. Let's find out what is actually true about giving birth. What is true about what's safe? Maybe all that matters isn't just the baby. Maybe the mother matters too. Maybe the family matters. Maybe their relationship matters. Maybe she shouldn't be so disempowered on her back with a whole pile of strangers between her legs and her husband being told to get behind her. Maybe that's not the way to do it. We can deprogram from the fear that has been implanted in us about having babies. We are not given a spirit of fear, but one of power and of love and a sound mind. We can learn about birth. We can be just like the neighbor. It doesn't have to belong behind the locked doors of L&D. I mean, if it should be part of our glorious, God-gifted humanity. We can learn skills, ordinary birth skills. Today, I think 93% of women with a breech-presenting baby, that's a baby whose bum is coming first, or their feet, will have cesarean surgery because the obstetricians have decided not to learn how to do it anymore. And then they've decided the midwife shouldn't do it because they don't do it. And I think, well, watch a YouTube video and figure it out. My thoughts are, the kid who makes your sandwich at Subway should know how to catch a breech baby. Suppose the mother goes in, she needs to get a sandwich, she's full term, she goes into the bathroom, her water breaks, and she's having a really fast labor and there's a little foot dangling out. Rather than calling an ambulance and everybody's screaming and quacking around while she goes off to get surgery, how about the kid says, "That's okay, ma'am, I can help." And he jumps over the counter and he's a more useful human. That's where we should be. We should be able to take care of each other. And it's time for us to really, I believe the future of humanity has to change this because they're destroying us. They're destroying the mother-baby bond. They're leaving women with a traumatic brain injury. It destroys relationships because she feels violated. He wasn't able to help her. We have got altered microbiome. It's affecting our gut flora. It's affecting our immune systems. These babies come out traumatized with their fight or flight reflex triggered at birth because of how they're handled and all the drugs that are given to them. And what are we seeing today? Most people spending the rest of their lives trying to calm their nervous systems down. Weed, alcohol, sex, porn, anything to calm it down. Maybe we just stop doing that to babies. I think we could change that. I think what we need to do is learn to be the neighbor. So anybody can call the neighbor, and you can be the neighbor. And now I have to put the caveat in because people get very upset when I don't put this in. I do believe that medical situations are probably better handled by medical people in a medical facility. Birth is rarely a medical situation. And if you have common birth skills, then you just solve it at home and stay there where you're a lot safer anyway. Well, thank you very much.
Wow, come on, give her a big hand. Now, amen. Now, you may be seated. We're gonna have a quick Q&A, and I challenge you. After I had a brief conversation, I went on Google, went on ChatGPT, and I was looking at this stuff about home births and stuff like that. I was shocked. It was actually saying it was more safe to give birth at home than in a hospital. And this is like statistics. I mean, you're the specialist, so I don't want to misquote anything about, but I was looking on that and I was like, wow. So this is kind of weird. Anyway, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I don't know if you have another microphone. Yes. That has batteries. Is this have batteries in it? Okay, so Joel has a microphone back there, and I'm going to pass the mic back to Billy. If anyone has any questions about home birth or anything around the birth area, she's okay.
Thank you. Okay. I do have one question in terms of the position that a woman should be in, because obviously being on the back doesn't open the pelvic floors, right? So should you be on your hands and knees or like on a 90-degree angle, like from the chair, or squatting? Sorry.
A woman who is not induced and is not doing what she is told to do by somebody, I've never seen a woman give birth on her back with her feet in the air. Well, there was one. She rolled on her side. The baby was coming so fast she couldn't get up. Throughout labor, the reason some labors hurt, not all, some do, is because it urges you to move, to make things more comfortable, to cope with it, to get this way and that way. And as the baby's coming, most women are upright. They might be hanging on to their husband. They might be leaning against a wall. They might be on hands and knees. They might be squatting, but they're all upright.
So you're saying it's not normal to be lying down. It's actually normal to be standing and stuff like, because all the births that you ever see anywhere, everywhere, the person's lying down and the doctor's out there and stuff like that.
So this starts in the 1600s with King Louis the 14th, I believe. He was a pervert, and this is where birth porn started. He liked to watch the babies coming out of his mistress's vaginas. Men were not allowed in the birth room, so they put up a curtain for him, and he was behind the curtain peering out. But then women birthed upright, often hanging on to a rope like this, the birth rope to hang on. So he instructed the midwives to put her flat on a table with her legs open so he could watch. And the obstetricians went, wait, what? You can get women to do that? You mean we don't have to crouch? And it swept through, and that's why you're still birthing on your back.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. We have, yeah. Okay.
So actually, I have a friend of mine who delivered his own child.
No, he didn't.
And
No, he didn't.
no.
She gave birth. He was just being a more useful human. So maybe he kept the kid from falling on the floor. She did all the work. So that's another word I want to strike out. Nobody delivers a baby. She gives birth, and if there's somebody in the room who's useful, well, don't let the kid fall on the floor. Go get a blanket. What did he do?
All right. Well, he assisted her in the matter,
Lovely.
and two things he explained to me that they did together. So he did allow her to get in a position that was most comfortable for her. And the next thing is they did it in the bathtub and filled the bathtub with water, so that when the baby does come out, it kind of helped with, I guess, catching the baby in a way, so that it's not just not impactful on them. So my question is, are those things that you would recommend? Also the position that she was in, from how he described it to me, she was on her hands and her knees. So that, while being in the tub with the water, filling the tub. So is that something that you would recommend for anyone delivering babies at home?
It's a great way to have a baby. We sometimes call water birth or the birth pool, we sometimes call it the home birth epidural. I mean, it's not the same, but it brings a lot of relief for many, many women. They find the buoyancy very comforting. It can be warm, it can be gentle. She can swish and move around. So yeah, water birth is great. We love it.
Hi. Thank you very much for sharing it. There's a lot for us to think of. I have a question though. For myself, my mom is here. At least when I was born, she went to a doctor and they measured my head, which was quite big in size. And my mom, well, unfortunately decided not to take the risk. So kind of what baffles me is that if we do not go to a doctor, let's say do like a CT scan or like any kind of a medical scan, she wouldn't have the option to know the risk of the size of my head when coming out. So just want to know, like, what do you think about this?
Those measurements are profoundly inaccurate, and they're also done in pregnancy before the hormones of pregnancy have done their action. So at the end of pregnancy, she releases a hormone called relaxin, which relaxes all of the ligaments. Her pelvis opens up a full 2 centimeters easily through this action. And so long as she's not induced, the hormones will soften, open, and the baby's head molds. So we've heard the soft spots in the baby's head. That allows the plates to mold over. So you can't tell in pregnancy how big the baby's going to be because the ultrasounds are notoriously inaccurate anyway. And it's the action of birth that opens her up and makes the baby smaller to pass through.
Just for the people that sometimes terms we forget, induced, what does that mean again?
Induced is ending a pregnancy prematurely. So it is kicking the baby out before the baby says they're ready. The hormones between the mother and the baby align, and for optimal health and optimal wellness, God created birth to have so many backup safety systems that you can even do it in a hospital and everybody comes out okay. Traumatized, but okay. And so anything that includes artificially breaking the baby's water, Putting in prostaglandins, that dose of Cervidil is actually made from isolated pig semen, for those that eat clean food, just so you know. Synthetic oxytocin, or even the supposed natural ones, which are still just the same. That's acupuncture, herbs, homeopathy, anything that tries to end the pregnancy early, because it is actually the baby who says they're ready. At the end, after all these hormones align, the baby's lungs produce a protein, is released into the amniotic fluid that says, hey, Ma, I'm ready to breathe.
Wow. Wow. Are you learning something? Because I am. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I was under the impression that, God didn't know what he was doing, so that you have to bring, no, well, I know what he is, but you don't think of these things, eh? We just have a question.
I just have one question. If you could tell me, like, what is the reasoning behind the umbilical cord being wrapped around the baby's neck? And if it's wrapped around, like, more than once, like, what does that mean?
Not a darn thing.
Okay, so
It just
nothing
means
bad happens?
you got a little ballet dancer there, and they're twirling and swirling, and I've seen it wrapped 4 or 5 times. If you look at the hard bony shoulder and the hard bony head, oh, look at this perfect little spot here God made for it to hide around. It's just such a nice, wonderful spot for it. But 1/3 of babies are born with a cord around. It doesn't mean anything.
We got a question over here.
So this lovely lady has been waiting.
Sorry. Praise God. I'm so grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
Because there are so many women who go into labor with so much fear. And I just want to thank God for my deliveries, because I've had 6 children and 4 of them were home birth. And I just thank God for that. But what really breaks my heart is to see first-time mothers going into the hospitals, and there's always an emergency that we have to do C-section. It really breaks my heart. And my question is, for someone who was misinformed and went down that route of C-section, is there a way for them to have a home birth after maybe a year or 2 years when they're giving birth again? Because I know that many midwives try to shy away from that as well. So is it possible for them to have home deliveries after that, or should we be concerned?
Absolutely, you can. I would say the bulk of my clientele for years and years were women who'd had previous cesareans, 1, 2, 3, and they were done. They were done with being cut open. So we taught, better nutrition, healing, how to use an osteopath to break up scar tissue, and we just have a baby. And they're lovely births. They're kind of my favorite.
What's an osteopath? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, an osteopath is a specially trained doctor of osteopathy that uses manual manipulation to work on fascia and connective tissue.
You got one more over here?
So there's a lot of talk, like if you Google, that's a problem with Google, right? You're gonna look up things like once you're past 41 weeks, they're saying all these bad things on Google, right? But I've heard, from my wife that you've done deliveries at 44 weeks. I'm wondering what's the reasoning behind that? Like they're telling, every time you look it up, it says like after 41 weeks is such a bad thing going on, but then, I'm hearing something different. So could you explain that a bit?
My sympathies, Carissa, because I too am a crock pot, not a microwave, and I cook my babies for 44 weeks. And it's really hard being pregnant that long. So what I learned to do after I found out I'm a crock pot is I just lied. And I would just say, oh yeah, I expect the baby in October, when actually I'm expecting maybe early September, just to have people not bother me. It's based on medicalized birth, and the assumption is that the longer you're pregnant, there's a higher possibility of the baby passing away before being born. So their hero mentality is, if we force the baby out, well then the baby can't possibly die in your uterus, and now we've saved the baby. But the thing is, no matter, the rate of induction has, gone up, quadrupled, and the rate of stillbirth has not changed. So they're not really saving babies. And it also seems to be that the babies that pass away in uterus, there's something not entirely robust about them. And so when they compare stillbirth rate and when they induce and they say, well, then the baby didn't die then, what we find is higher mortality in the first week. So something just didn't connect for that dear precious one that's going to be in the arms of Jesus. But they're not saving babies. Now, if there is a medical situation and it looks like the induction could really benefit, well then it could be prudent. But those reasons are very, very small, and certainly not routinely at 41 weeks. And they say, the stillbirth rate doubles, as in it goes from 0.4 out of 1,000 to maybe 0.6 out of 1,000. That's the doubling.
Wow. I have a question as well. How does it work with, I know in the Bible people had twins and people have quadruplets and stuff like that. How does that work with home births and things like that?
Well, my grandmother had fraternal twins for her first baby in a 2-room shack on the prairies. Two is you're not induced, so all the hormones are there. Number 3, you're upright, and you only push when you feel like it. So we see very, very little of it. And if we do, it's so minor, just go to bed and stay there. Mother Billy's rule, 6 days in bed after you have the baby. No exceptions. You can get up and go to the bathroom, but then eat in bed, stay in bed. Best 6 days of your life.
So I had a question. So like they say that after 35 years old, like it's more riskier to be pregnant and all that. Can you tell
I hear
me?
having an ingrown toenail is a reason for a hospital birth too.
Wow.
The extra layers of risk that have been added on. My stepfather was born, he was an only child, and he was born to a 52-year-old mother. And at the time, it was considered a miracle and a blessing from God. And nobody was flapping their wings about this older mother. They were so impressed with the gift of God at 52. So this 35-year-old stuff, well, if a mother is only because women who don't take care, or anybody who doesn't take care of themselves, by the time they're 35, they could have blood glucose issues. They could have hypertension. They could have things that show that you haven't taken good care of yourself. Then if you get pregnant, you could develop more glucose problems. You could develop more hypertension. So then they say, oh, it's very risky. Healthy women are healthy women are healthy women, whether they're 35 or they're 52.
It's not working? No, no. So we have two questions. We can ask that. Just for the online. Oh, okay. But this one works now.
The baby comes in, is in the mother's arms. Eventually, she will emerge to the trail placenta that goes in a bowl. And we have mom lie down, placenta in the bowl, lie down, and there's some food. Be nice to her. And I don't know, maybe 2 hours later or so, we might cut the cord. But if the baby's stuck, then you need to have breech training to know how to help the baby with your hands.
I do have another question over here. Is there a relationship between disorders and hospital births?
Sorry, put your hand up so I know where I'm talking. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, is there a relationship between disorders and hospital births?
Absolutely. Yes. Neurological dysregulation, in particular from the overuse of synthetic oxytocin, particularly in boys. It shows up several years later. So it's dose dependent on the neurological dysregulation. Also, injections given to the baby at birth can cause neurological dysregulation.
So you're saying that there's more disorders in the hospital system?
Because of the medicalization of birth, yes. Those antibiotics wipe out the baby's gut flora, which is their immune system, that also is communication with their brain and their personality type. And the baby when the mother has an epidural, and sometimes it's needed, so I'm not anti, but that's fentanyl in that epidural, and it does cross to the baby. So the baby is being exposed to fentanyl in the womb. So yes, it does alter their behavior and their life choices.
Yeah, hi. Do you know a natural way of preventing cholestasis of pregnancy?
Sure do.
Yeah? Okay, I gotta talk to you.
Yes, it is. Cholestasis is considered a disease of the bile ducts, and what it does is it means the bile acids build up in the mother's blood and they're not eliminated, and she becomes so profoundly itchy that the inside of her eyeballs are itchy, and the solution is to end the pregnancy and deliver the baby early. What removes bile acids from the bloodstream is albumin. Albumin is made in the liver. It's a protein. Also, egg whites are almost pure albumin. So the solution on our end is you eat those eggs. You eat so many eggs through your pregnancy. You get your choline up. You eat so much choline, and you have a minimum first trimester 80 grams of protein, second and third 100 grams of protein a day. Eating becomes your full-time job.
Amen. Just a question on the umbilical cord, because I've seen like a movement online of people who are leaving the umbilical cord attached to the baby and the placenta for a long time. It seems a bit scary to me, but I don't know anything about birthing and babies. Is that safe?
It's called a lotus birth.
Yeah, the lotus birth.
So
yeah.
after, the placenta is an organ. It's like, meat. And so it has to be preserved in salt. So the baby stays attached to the placenta that is then put in a baggie with salt and sometimes lavender and other nice things. And the cord dries up to it's very, very tough, rigid, like tougher than beef jerky. And then it eventually falls off around day 4 or 5. Yeah, it's completely safe. Yeah. Yeah, otherwise it'll get stinky.
Wait. Safe. Sorry, I missed the part. Safe, like.
It is safe to leave the baby attached to the placenta
To leave it
until
attached.
it falls off.
So the placenta. Sorry for my ignorance. I have many babies, and my head is not working exactly. The placenta comes out, right?
Yes, it does. It comes
Okay.
out.
and leaving the kid, the baby connected
Yes.
to it.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
safe. Yeah.
So just curious about on this topic, how long, what is the ideal time frame for, will you wait until falls off, or you cut it in a certain time, or?
Yeah, it's up to the parents. We never, ever, ever cut a cord while the placenta is still inside a mother, because the main mode of communication, chemical communication between the mother and the baby, is through the placenta. Now, once the placenta is outside the body, does it still communicate with the baby? We don't know. Nobody's asked that question. I have observed that if a practitioner, midwife, whatever, rushes in and cuts that cord out, according to the clock, the baby cries. If the mother looks at the baby and says, no, the baby's ready, you can cut the cord, they never cry. So we just wait until mom says they're ready. And my experience is it's usually about 2 hours.
A weird question, and I don't recommend it, and I would never do it. But what's all this stuff about people eating their placenta or something? Yeah, sorry, it was a question. I said I'm not saying to do it, and I never agreed with it. So just FYI. But that's what I see online. People doing that.
It's called placentophagy, and it is believed that it has medicinal benefits. And I will say yes, a raw, fresh placenta is loaded with hormones and nutrients, and it is powerful medicine. If a mother's had a hemorrhage, and we don't transfer to a hospital lightly or easily, she's had a hemorrhage, we get it stopped because we use herbs and we use our hands and we know what to do, we get it stopped, and she's just out of it. We will use the placenta, we'll take a piece of it, put it in a smoothie. Every woman has said it's the best thing she's ever had. Not even kidding you. I've never tried it, but every woman says it's the best thing. We put it in a smoothie, maybe some yogurt and some blueberries and something like that. And she has a couple of sips, and the medicine is so powerful she comes to instantly. So I did need to have a conversation with someone, and I needed her informed consent to transport, and she couldn't give it. So we gave her a placenta, and she perked up and was able to give consent. Others feel that baking it, dehydrating it, and putting it into capsules, they find that very beneficial. The research on that isn't quite robust, so I don't tend to recommend things I can't back up with research, but some people like it.
When I was giving birth, we were bombarded with stem cell collection. Is that something that people should sign up to do? Like, just in case your child gets sick, you'll have the blood from the placenta, I believe it is? Is that
No, it's actually the baby's blood. So when the baby is born, their circulation system goes through their body to the umbilical cord, through the placenta, and back to the baby. That's where it drops off wastes, picks up oxygen and nutrients. So at any point, 1/3 of the baby's blood volume is in the placenta. When it's born, the medical industry says, I'm going to cut it now, and deprives the baby of 1/3 and sometimes 1/2 of their blood. Because human babies, God gave us so many backup safety systems, they pretty much survive. The preemies sometimes don't. But that baby just had a catastrophic blood loss. So another industry comes along and says, well, why don't we just store it and market it? So that's your baby's, those stem cells are circulating in the baby's blood, and it forms the basis of their immune system. So you can either put their immune system in their body, or you can put it in a refrigerator and hope that at some point those cells are still viable. When in fact some stem cell technology is so advanced, they can get stem cells out of your own body. You don't need your infant's blood. So to put it bluntly, it's a scam.
So I have a question. I wanted to know, it's me. I wanted to know if you could just share some information on the topic of ultrasounds. Is it necessary? The effects of ultrasound. Do you need to take one or you don't? Just if you could share that.
Yeah, ultrasound is a war technology that was developed to detect enemies in water. What is it about your baby that's an enemy? So that technology, so that's what you think of the roots of it. Should we be using a wartime technology against our babies? I want to question that. Also, that technology is the same technology that breaks up cysts, that breaks up scar tissue, that is aimed at your baby's brain. What is it about your baby's cells that need to be moved? So ultrasound is not benign at all. However, that said, it's the best technology we've got for trying to figure out the roots or the reasons of a problem. So if there is a problem, if you've got blood pouring down your legs, an ultrasound is a good way to get information. But as a routine, it has not improved outcomes for mothers or babies whatsoever. What it has done is improved outcomes for surgeons because they do more inductions and more surgery.
Can I ask a question from online?
Oh, okay, you're gonna do it? Okay.
Oh, you could go.
Okay, you could go.
Is it, oh man, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, you know where it is. Yeah.
Okay, we got a question here, and of course the screen went off. Okay. All right. From Jocelyn, it says here, what are the risks of natural birth after having a 3rd, 4th degree tear? Should you wait to have children after having a tear?
Well, you want it to heal. So paying attention to your healing, and that can include comfrey root poultices to help with the healing. But once you've healed, scar tissue is very tough. And then nutrition and a different approach to birth to prevent tearing a second time. So I see no reason why it would be a contraindication to having more children.
A second follow-up question, I'll read her second follow-up question there is, what are the risks of meconium when you have gone over your estimate delivery date 40 plus weeks?
Okay, meconium
and if you could explain what
is the word that we use for what's inside a newborn's intestines. We say it's poop, but it's not. Poop is what we, from taking in food and then having to eliminate it. So meconium is a special kind of thick, tarry, green type substance that is through the entire alimentary canal from the stomach down to the anus. And the purpose of that is to prevent the intestinal tract from fusing together. So as the baby matures, so does all of their plumbing. And it appears to be, based on women who've had multiple ultrasounds, as the baby gets a little older, closer to term, they start releasing it. And they release some in the amniotic sac, and then they swallow it and they process it, and then maybe a little later they'll release some more. The water is continuously being renewed and replenished, and it is replenished about every 3 hours to about a cup an hour. There's about 3 cups in there. So if the baby passes meconium in the womb, it's not a problem, and they tend to do it all the time. And the older the baby gets, the more likely that's happening, and most of us don't know it because we're not having an ultrasound every 3 hours. And then if the baby, when it's born, comes out and passes it, everybody's so proud of this baby. But if just a few centimeters before, when the baby was up there, passes some meconium, everybody loses their mind. And so it's really just an indication that the baby's bottom works. In the medical setting, it can be an indication this baby is becoming very stressed from the drugs that they've been given. Kind of like we adults might have an adrenaline poop. We get so nervous or excited, and then suddenly we have to go to the bathroom. That's what they sometimes say is happening to the baby. And then they're worried the baby is going to inhale it. Now, babies are not breathing in the womb. That's what the placenta and the umbilical cord are doing. They're not breathing. They don't draw air into their lungs until they're on the outside. So if we don't stress the baby, and then if they do come out and there's a little, mess on their face, we just wipe it off. But if you are in a medical setting that has stressed this baby, and then the baby comes out, first thing they do is cut the cord, so they've lost 1/3, 1/2 their blood volume, and the baby's instinctive reaction at that point, it comes from the baroreceptor that sits on their heart, is to gasp. And they suck in the meconium. I've never seen an issue of a baby breathing in meconium in all of my career outside of the medical setting.
I guess one more question, and thank you so much, by the way.
My pleasure.
Isn't this great, guys? Okay.
It's warm up here.
What would you say, there's panic out there, I guess, if someone, say we're having twins or more than one child in the womb, and people are saying, oh, well, after a certain period of time, like 40 weeks or something, it's a risk, or, that shouldn't happen, or this is a medical emergency, all sorts of thoughts like that. What is the truth about, I know you kind of covered it a little bit before, but I don't know if anything changes, or if you could touch on that, because it seems like some either medical professionals or I don't know out there are like, oh, this is serious. They say a lot of things. So what do you have to say?
Oh, there's nothing that ruins a good pregnancy like finding out you got twins. What is a double blessing from God, which is, talk about God's abundance, then turns into a medical nightmare of every disaster that ever could possibly happen and everything that needs to be done. There are conditions that do require medical attention, twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, where one twin gets all the blood, the other one isn't getting enough to thrive. That one benefits from medical management, and unfortunately that does require an ultrasound. But the supposed risks are, other than that one, is perhaps higher stillbirth, but that comes back to how well is the mother. What is the mother's nutrition? Is she getting a minimum of 120 grams of protein a day for these 2 babies? What is her how is she being cared for? Is it just visit after visit after visit? Or how is she being cared for? Is she getting the kind of loving and nurturing that ensures she doesn't get hypertension? Is she being nourished? Is she being blessed? That changes the outcome. I have worked with many women who were developing complex pregnancies, and they decided they just could not put up with the fear and what was being done to them. They tapped out. They came to me. We would spend, every visit was about 2 hours, 3 hours. We'd have a cup of tea, and we'd talk gardening, and we'd talk pets, and we'd talk a bit about the pregnancy. And within 1 week, her wellness just improved dramatically. So how many of these twin pregnancies are ruined by the superimposition of this fear nonsense without any knowledge of how pregnant women need to eat?
So this whole thing about like time and stuff like that, like is that like a thing when it comes to complex pregnant, like with twins and stuff? Like, could it go over a certain time, or like, or is that just this whole time, like you said before, is it just like put on us by the medical?
Yeah, a lot of these numbers are just made up. They're made up numbers. Every 35 years old is suddenly high risk. If you have IVF, 38 weeks is when you have to deliver. Like, all these numbers are made up. So they should all be questioned, especially when we consider what the outcomes are and the spiritual root behind it. We should be always questioning.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more question, and Sister Ashley, 2 more questions, and then we're gonna give her a break. Okay? Okay, is that okay?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Thank you
I'm
so
enjoying
much.
myself.
Amen.
Thank you. My question, I remember you mentioned about like in the medical setting, how women are like getting like trauma from like the invasiveness of the procedures. So I was wondering, like, with the women you've interacted with the home births, like what has postpartum been like for them? Like how do they deal with it? And how like would you help them?
I think women should be preparing for postpartum perhaps more than they prepare for their birth. Because for many women, postpartum knocks them flat. They've just, yes. It is a major physical transformation, a major, been through this massive rite of passage, and she needs way more care than we ever give women in our culture, and it can knock them flat. Much of the postpartum depression that I was exposed to was in fact PTSD. And the reason women are not screened for PTSD is because we know what causes it and they won't take accountability for it. So and sometimes a subsequent postpartum, it just brings up unresolved stuff. There could be unresolved issues from an abusive childhood. There could be unresolved issues of separation, loss of parents, loss of love. And in that incredibly vulnerable time, kind of you don't know what you're going to get. So you prepare for postpartum.
And the last question, Sister Socratia. Did you have another question, sister?
First, God bless you for sharing this information. And from what I've seen, like online, like, is it true, like the placenta costs around 50 grand? And like, in your, like with what you know, like, what do you think the medical industry does with the placentas after? And last question is, for those people who have low iron, they kind of force you to, they give you like a boost, right? Like an injection. They kind of try to do that with me and I didn't take it. But other than like eating the right foods, like what do you suggest, like getting your iron up, like so you don't take what they're trying to force you? And thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I have heard that placentas are sold. They're very, very profitable to some medical institutions. They are sold to cosmetics companies. That goes into face creams and other things. And then it's sold for stem cell research. And particularly if they cut the cord early and 1/3 of the baby's blood is in it, they can harvest a lot of it out of a placenta. So that's one potential use. Supplemental iron. We need to find out, first of all, why your iron is low. If it's low in first trimester, it needs to be addressed, or prior to. And that is it diet related? Is there an autoimmune disease? Is there absorption issues? Is there a problem with the gut lining? We need to address the core cause. Low iron in second and third trimester is profoundly misunderstood by the industry, and iron supplements cause gestational diabetes. And they also cause intrauterine growth restriction and can contribute to preterm birth. So we need to be very wise.
Amen. Well, Carissa? Yeah, okay, final question.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I just wanted to know if you have any wisdom to share with like pregnancy etiquette, what to say to the mothers, and just to be nice and not, if you could just talk on that topic on, you know, even if you have like friends that have like good intentions, maybe you could share how friends and family can have certain boundaries, and then, you know, just pregnancy etiquette in general.
Oh, yes, a pregnant woman is like open season, isn't it? Yep. She hears everybody else's horror story. And I think because pregnant women, for women who are dealing with PTSD and birth trauma, a pregnant woman is a trigger. And they're not getting help for their own trauma. Yeah, it's tough because you want to be nice. That's the other problem, is at the end of pregnancy, or as pregnancy continues, your estrogen levels go up, and estrogen is the hormone of accommodation, because God's wisdom is you would have this high levels of a hormone that says, welcome, baby. Let me create a home for you. Let everybody here be happy and engaged, which is why at the end of pregnancy, she doesn't go into the hospital fighting. She'll acquiesce. She'll want to make a cup of tea for the obstetrician that's belittling her. So you're kind of at a hard place. We as a culture have to learn to get a grip and be nice, stop sharing scary stories, stop reiterating what the industry says. And in fact, we call these flying monkeys. Flying monkeys comes from the Wizard of Oz, and it is people who are recruited to do the bidding of basically a narcissist. And I do say the industry is profoundly narcissistic. I'm not saying that all people are, they're not. It's the industry itself and how it operates. So they send out the flying monkeys to make you behave, to make you conform. Go get the test, go get the ultrasound. You don't want a dead baby, do you? And they're the flying monkeys doing the bidding. And how to deal with it, you tell me.
Now, because of the years, and thank you, let's give her a big hand. Amen. I guess amen. That's one of the best standing ovations I've ever heard here.
Thank you, you're very kind.
I guess one of the last questions is oh boy. Oh boy. Hold on. It's coming. Just, it's like a slow engine, just revving it up. Vroom, vroom. Okay, well, one of them that I do remember is how, oh, yes, from the years of brainwashing, what if someone, after hearing all of that, is still paranoid and still is like, what you said is true, sounds true, you seem like you know what you're talking about, but still want to go to the hospital.
And their nervous system isn't ready. The nervous system has to be ready to accept something new. The nervous system is wired for survival. And if all they've heard is, I will survive if I do that, you can't just say, well, you know, it's not really a good place, maybe don't do it. Their nervous system is saying, I'm going to survive, I'm going to survive, I'm going to survive. And they will go there to survive. And that's not a weakness, that's survival. That's a God-given instinct.
And the second thing is what if someone wants to do this and just is clueless, just doesn't know how? Like, where do they start? Where do they go? Is there a resource you have, or is there a course you have, or something like? Because it sounds really great.
Come join me, harriganhive.com. That's my community. Come join me there.
So is that a website?
harriganhive.com. And then it's a community that you can join and learn from and start watching, listen to my podcasts. And I did used to teach a one-day intensive on how to have a baby. So who knows, I may do that again. But
All right. Well, let's give another hand of applause.
thank you.
And we really appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming. God bless you. Okay, well, we are dismissed. We already closed the service, so if you gotta go, you gotta go. And and one thing I will also say, just to add to that etiquette thing, it kind of does bother me when people, like, when someone has a baby and they ask the mother, and it bothers me as a guy, but I'm assuming it probably bothers the mom, like, what kind of pregnancy did you have? Did you have this birth? Did you have a C-section or something? It's like, when you really think about it, like, someone's asking you, what, did the baby come out of your private part? I want to know. Like, that's none of nobody's business, is it? I think that's a bit